Well, for some reason, he got a little excited, I guess, and he kicked it up in there because you got all the silt in there.
Yeah, all that sediment and everything else on the...
Couldn't see anything. It's like swimming in milk.
Oh,
And I'm thinking, whoops. So my heart's doing one of these, and I can see my pressure gauge real close here, and it's
going down,
starting to go down. I said, I'm running out of time here. I got to make some decisions.
oh my goodness. That must have been harrowing.
Well, it was, and I'm sure other divers have had worse close calls than that, but every year there's several divers die on the Great Lakes, not just on shipwrecks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff DuVernois. We have all these wonderful Great Lakes, and it may come as a surprise to you, but we have a shipwreck or two that are out there. And what's absolutely fascinating to me as we learn more about these shipwrecks is the actual people who go out and find these shipwrecks. And some of these have been lost for well over 100 years, but there's actually people that are actively out there looking for them. So what I've done is I've managed to get my hands on one of these underwater Indiana Jones, so to speak, that helps us to find these historical pieces of Michigan history. And so sitting with me today is Tom Farnquist. He is the director emeritus of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society. Tom, how are you?
I'm doing very well, and I'm pleased to talk to you, Cliff. This sounds like a pretty exciting program.
Yeah, I'm beyond geeked to talk to you about it. So why don't you tell us, what is the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society?
It's a nonprofit historical society that was put together basically out of concern originally, because a lot of artifacts were disappearing from ships that we had found around Whitefish Point, because that's where we're based, really. And another reason was we knew there was lots of stories to tell. And the reason I say that, I was a school teacher, and I would go out and film these wrecks and bring the programs back to my students. And I just found it fascinating because they were so fascinated in the history lying on the bottom of the Great Lakes. There's over 6,000 shipwrecks,
Sweet Moses.
Yeah, and over 35, 40,000 people have perished on shipwrecks. These are known documented wrecks. I mean, documented meaning they had some kind of a record for it going down, but there were ships before that. Some of the estimates bringing up as close to 10,000 shipwrecks.
It's amazing the Great Lakes are big enough to have 10,000 shipwrecks in them.
Well, it says something about it. I mean, you go back in the 1880s, 1890s, when you got all these ships, on commerce was really booming on the lakes far north. There was a lot of collisions. People were running into each other, and fires on ships, and human error, storm casualties.
Right.
Everything you can think of, but put ships on the bottom.
So, Tom, tell us a little bit about where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I'm from Sault Ste. Marie here, beautiful St. Mary's River, where I live right now, 4 miles below the locks. And I graduated from Northern Michigan University with a degree in biology, not history, biology. And I took a teaching position in Sault Ste. Marie, teaching life sciences in middle school.
Oh, cool.
Well, the thing about it is I've got June, July, and August off, and I had this real affinity for anything underwater. I was raised practically on the water by my parents. Every weekend we'd be going somewhere where we can get in the water,
Right.
And eventually I borrowed some diving equipment from a neighbor at 16, did my first dive, and I was smitten then.
Okay. There's a lot to unpack right there.
Oh, there is, yeah.
Yeah. So let's take a couple steps back. So first off, why did you study biology?
Well, I studied biology because of a couple of teachers I had in high school that inspired me. I found anything living to be really fascinating, drove my parents nuts, dragging home, whatever creatures I could capture, whether it was a bunny rabbit or a flying squirrel or a snake or something. But I liked living things, and biology that's what it's about.
And now you're talking about you borrowing your neighbor's equipment so you could go diving. Did you have any training at diving at all, or you're just like, I hope I come back alive? I mean, what did that look like?
Well, I don't know if I was fearless or stupid.
At 16?
Yeah, fearless probably. But we weren't going to do any great deep dives. We borrowed 2 tanks, 2 regulators. We had our own masts and snorkels, a neighbor friend of mine. We went out into a lake called Monaco Lake, and it was so cold, we didn't have any insulation on, no survival suits or anything like that. But I still fell in love with it. I even found things on the bottom of that lake that I didn't know even existed, like mud puppies swimming around. And
Oh, right.
fish like that. And it kind of, and then once I got out of school, I went up to Lake State. It was called Michigan Tech Sioux Branch at the time. It wasn't called Lake Superior State University. That came later.
Right.
I had a couple instructors there that were really interested in the fact that I did some diving. And the one guy that I had, Vigo Thompson, Dad was a professional hard hat diver. And we had several conversations. I took zoology and invertebrate zoology and botany and some of those courses. And another guy, Gil Gleason, inspired me also. He taught ecology and so on. So I had a real love for anything alive and the environment and so on. But one thing led to another. I got my degree, came back to the Sioux, took a job. But then I had the summers off and all this energy and interest in anything maritime underwater.
Right. What made you get into teaching?
What's that?
Why did you decide to get into teaching?
I don't know. It appealed to me. I got along with the kids real well. I found that out once I got in the classroom.
Right.
I had a teacher up at Northern Michigan University, Louis Taccolini, that I did my student intern teaching with. And, it's crazy. They wait until your senior year to do that. They should give it your freshman year to see if you can handle a classroom or not. But Louis Taccolini was a really inspiring teacher. He won the Teacher of the Year award in Michigan. And when you walked into his classroom, the whole place was alive. Every kid had something to take care of.
Right. Now, when you talk about getting into, because I understand your appetite to get into the water,
Yes.
right? Spending as much time under the water. Where did this love of exploring underwater come from?
I guess that's kind of hard to pinpoint. I was always kind of an adventuresome kid, breaking bones and doing crazy things and driving my parents nuts. But my dad was Navy. He was in the Navy. He was in the Seabee stationed on Guam, okay, in World War II.
Right.
And he was asked to join a unit called UDT.
Ah, yes.
And he was kind of my hero. But he didn't go into it because my mother, his wife, thought it would be too dangerous. And it was all volunteer. But I always thought that was pretty spectacular. He was a powerful swimmer. And that's probably one of the reasons they kind of went after him, to see if he'd leave the Seabees and join UDT. So little things like that in my past kind of supported my interest in what's underwater. And then growing up during the Jacques Cousteau programs on TV.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. We're in the Wayback Machine now.
Oh, yeah. Even Sea Hunt,
Yeah.
some of that stuff, as corny as it is now when you look at it, but Cousteau programs were just amazing. I have all his books, and that kind of stuff. So I don't know. And then I started being one of them,
Right.
and we got pretty serious. The diving that I've done in my past is serious, serious stuff.
Now, actually, let's talk about that for a second, because you talked about borrowing your neighbor's equipment. Somehow or another, you came back alive. At what point did you decide to chase your certification and get it? Are you SSI or PADI?
PADI, I'm PADI. PADI certified.
Okay.
Yeah, there was a Air Force fellow from Kinchlow Air Force Base that offered basic scuba in the high school pool. And I signed up with it, a couple other friends along with me. And that was my introduction on how to do it right,
Well, you came back alive from doing it your own, so you did something right.
Yeah. Not without some aches and pains.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
I bet.
Yeah. A lot of close calls. And
Right. Now you get your certification in diving, right? So now you're bona fide. At what point in time did this, I guess, hobby, for lack of a better term, or maybe this extreme interest, whatever it is, that you decided, you know what, I'm going to start really chasing this down and really start going after shipwrecks?
Well, I had an interest in diving, and then there was a little club being formed in Sault Ste. Marie called the Chippewa Dolphins, and they were older mentors, and I was kind of the kid, and I went on some pretty exciting dives, and mostly inland lakes, nothing on major shipwrecks, but just gained more and more experience all along the way. Then when I graduated from let me back up just a little bit. When I was up at Northern Michigan University, I had a friend back in St. Ignace, Michigan. His name is Ron Scott. He called me. He said, "Get your butt down here." I said, "Where?" "St. Ignace." He says, "A ship just sunk called the SS Cedarville in 1966. That goes back a ways.
Right.
But we were diving, and the bubbles were still coming off it. And there was
Oh, my goodness.
10 people missing on it. And that, to me, was very, very exciting. and I had old double hose regulator and some of the stuff I'd had
Right.
that I'd purchased prior, and then I got to meet some other people that led, you're as good as the people that surround you,
Yes.
and it started becoming safer and safer, even though we did some pretty crazy dives that some people said you can't do. We did, I mean, with sighting on, on the air, on safety.
Right.
We would be careful, but we were still doing things that, even the instructors at U of M said you can't do that. Dr. Nimmeroff and Dr. Summers said, you guys can't dive that deep on air. Well, we were diving that deep on air, like 270 was my deepest dive on air. He even talked to guys today that are certified in mixed gas, rebreathers, and so on. He says, you can't do that 270 feet. But these guys I was diving with, we were all doing it. And nobody got killed.
Kids, listen to your parents. Just want to put that out there right now.
Yeah.
So this is actually incredible. And I know that part of this, the certification for scuba, and I don't know if they did it when you got certified or not, but I know that there's actually a special certification for exploring shipwrecks.
Yeah, you can get certification for night dives and rescue diver and shipwreck diver, and some of those classes that they offer now are really great because they have good videos with them.
Right.
That better than when an instructor could, improve. And got quite a view coming by there right now.
Yeah.
Love it. You're on the river.
Nice. And so with your certification, I guess you're doing things that you're told not to do. So I guess part of it is that when did the Shipwreck Historical Society really start to form and really start to take shape?
Well, okay. After I graduated from Northern Michigan University, had this teaching job, I heard about a gentleman coming up from Waukegan, Illinois. His name was John Steele, and he had this, I think, 60-foot gill net fish tug,
right,
with a sonar that he would lower down through a 55-gallon barrel drum through the hull of his boat. It had a 2-mile range for looking for anomalies on the bottom.
That's incredible. And this was about when?
This was 1972.
Oh, that's incredible. Okay.
Yeah, he was kind of on the cutting edge. He had already found a couple dozen shipwrecks in the lower lakes, but he said there's some low-hanging fruit up in Lake Superior because nobody's doing it yet. And I found out he was coming and got a hold of him, and he said, oh, yeah, come on along. So I joined the crew, and that's when we found 4 shipwrecks the first day out.
Oh, amazing.
I mean, some of the wrecks I've looked for took 10 years to find.
Right.
I mean, I thought this is going to be easy. I'll get my own boat, my own sonar, and go and find all kinds of wrecks.
Right.
Well, I did find quite a few, but they weren't easy to find, not like when I was with John Steele.
Right. So then you would use this sonar,
Yes,
find these shipwrecks, and then you would dive them.
Dive them. Actually, what we were recording the shipwreck with was 16-millimeter movie film. He'd load it in the dark on the boat, put it in here, had this big light on top of it, big Farallon. I don't know how many watts it was, huge, but it'd light this room up, and dive down there, and you'd wind it up on the surface, okay? And it would run out down there, and you'd have to wind it again, then it'd run out, and you have to wind it the third time. You got 2.5 minutes of film.
Oh, my goodness.
Per dive. So the good thing about that was it taught you how to plan scenes, choreograph stuff, because you didn't want to waste it.
Correct, yes.
And then I'm diving with a couple of guys, okay, we're going to do this, and I want you to do that, and so on and so forth. And one guy, we called him the silt monster because he'd kick it all up and turn around and wave at you at the camera, all the things you're not supposed to do. But it taught you how to be a good cinema photographer.
Right.
It really did, and I got some pretty incredible footage on a lot of virgin shipwrecks that way.
That's awesome. For our audience, we're going to take a quick break and thank our sponsor. When we come back, we're going to talk to Tom a lot more about finding the shipwrecks and what you can expect when you come to the Historical Society. We'll see you after the break. Hey, if you are enjoying these great interviews, just take a moment and go to totalmichigan.com/join, and you can get these episodes sent directly to your inbox because there's a lot more great stories coming. See you there. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Total Michigan, where we interview ordinary Michiganders doing some pretty extraordinary things. I'm your host, Cliff DuVernois. Today, we are talking with the modern day Actually, Jacques Cousteau. I was going to say underwater Indiana Jones, but Jacques Cousteau, we're going to run with that one there.
Okay.
The director emeritus of the Great Lakes Shipwreck Historical Society, that would be Tom Farnquist. Tom, before the break, you were starting to share with us about your experience with finding some of these shipwrecks and this gentleman that you had connected with and the sonar that goes 2 miles and all this cutting edge technology for 1970s time, which is absolutely great. So if you would, why don't you share with us, first off, the process of finding a shipwreck? So is it something where you scan the water bottom, find a boat, go down, and then identify it? Or do you use records to try to figure out what ships have gone down in that area and then go after them? How does that work?
Well, I think you pretty well summed it up. Yeah, you got to do your homework first. Example is the Russia that I found 2 years ago. Been looked for 6 decades
Right.
by some very experienced shipwreck hunters, and they couldn't find it. And after doing my homework and talking to some of these guys, I had an area mapped out on the chart where I wanted to go search where I thought this ship would be.
Right.
I found it in 2 days.
Amazing.
And one guy had spent 20 summers coming up in 2 weeks at a time searching for the Russia.
That's amazing. And now how do you go about that? Because I'm asking this question because I'm thinking like if a ship sinks, it normally doesn't go straight down. Right. So you don't know, first off, I guess the exact coordinates of where the ship was sinking, but then it may be moving as it's going down towards the bottom. So I'm thinking it could probably wind up someplace completely different.
Well, that's a misnomer because when ships break the surface and start down, they don't go anywhere but straight down.
Oh, okay.
They plow into the bottom, and depending on if it's stern first or bow first, it plows into the bottom. And if it's carrying iron ore, a lot of like these early ships, schooners that had iron ore on them, they go down and they open up like a filleted fish because it's just so much destruction
Wow.
when they hit the bottom. But there's some ships, for instance, I found one that had grain in it, 1892, called the Samuel Mather. That's an interesting story there. It's the one that people had looked for before and didn't find.
Right.
I, along with a friend, went out and found it in one day. A matter of hours, actually, and dove it. And it's a spectacular wreck. Masts are standing. It's a wooden steamer.
Okay.
The after cabins are there. And it was carrying wheat. So when it went down a little more gently than you would if you had iron ore or something like that
Right.
in it. So it's a spectacular wreck. And that's one of them that I found that I wanted to find and couldn't believe people couldn't find it because it was right where they said it would be,
Right.
middle of the shipping lanes. And other people, I don't know how they got by it. Even John Steele with his 2-mile range sonar couldn't find it.
Really?
Yeah.
How do you go about finding, if these people are looking for 20 years, how do you find it in one day?
Well, a little bit of luck, but a lot of homework. And then I had some help from 2 friends of mine from Minnesota, Jerry Eliason and Ken Merriman. They were down in Lake Huron already doing some research in their boat looking for some wrecks.
Right.
And I said, would you help me locate the Russia? Well, what kind of information do you have? So Jerry and I plotted it out and said, I think this is where it's going to be. And we went out and found it the second day out, actually. And the other part of that story is this guy that used to come up there for 20 years in a row.
Right.
Name is Paul Ehorn. He's from Illinois. He has a great sonar. He's very good. He's found a lot of virgin shipwrecks. I called him. I said, hey, Paul, friend of mine. I said, I know you've been looking for the Russia. Can you tell me where you searched? He said, are you kidding me? I'm not done searching. I'm not going to tell you where I searched. That'd make it too easy for you. He said, but I will tell you about one wreck I found that I thought might have been the Russia when I first saw it on sonar, called the Celtic. It turned out to be a 3-masted schooner that went down in 1903 with the whole crew.
Right.
And he told me where that was, and I plotted it out, and I says, God, it's really close to where I think the Russia is. So we went by the Celtic, and another pass, we found the Russia. 1,200 feet from the Celtic. Poor Paul had missed it by 1,200 feet.
Oh my goodness.
And he kept looking further and further south and getting further and further away from where it actually was.
Right. So has there ever been a point in time, because I imagine you're finding all these shipwrecks, you're exploring them, you were talking about your hobby for film. Is there ever a point in time where you were exploring a shipwreck where you were like, I have no idea if I'm going to get out of this thing or not?
Oh, a couple of close ones, yeah. One instance, on a wreck called the John Mitchell that sank off Whitefish Point in another collision.
Right.
A lot of ships went down in collisions around Whitefish because this is where the upbound and downbound shipping lanes come perilously close to one another.
Right.
So it was one, and it claimed 3 of the crew, but it rolled over and sank upside down. It was carrying coal, a lot lighter than iron ore,
Right.
somewhat buoyant. Anyway, the only way into the ship, pilot house is crushed in the bottom after cabs and crushed in, was a side hatch that you see often when freighters go by here. If one went by right now, I could show you. It's a little side hatch that you'll see the engineer hanging out, getting fresh air once in a while, whatever he's doing. That was the only way in and out of there.
Wow.
So you swim in there with your lights and you're exploring this massive engine room with ladders and stairs and lights that are standing off the floor, which would have been the ceiling, and then tables nailed to the ceiling, which really was the floor.
Right.
And so the plan was, Jim Cooper and I, a friend of mine, I was going to get way in the engine room and have him swim in, shine his light on the table and look at the light bulbs and stuff like that. Well, for some reason, he got a little excited, I guess, and he kicked it up in there because you got all the silt in there.
All that sediment and everything else on the, yeah.
Couldn't see anything. It's like swimming in milk.
Oh,
And I'm thinking, whoops, this isn't good. I couldn't see his light anymore because he turned around and left.
I think that's like the first rule of diving. Never leave your dive buddy.
Oh, my God, yeah. So my heart's doing one of these, and I can see my pressure gauge real close here, and it's,
it's going down.
starting
Yeah.
to go down. And I said, I'm running out of time here. I got to make some decisions. So I decided to do a right turn, found the side of the boat, and I knew that the main beams that held up the main deck ran from port to starboard, and I started going past those, and finally I saw some light where the door was, and I relaxed after that.
Oh my goodness. That must have been harrowing.
Well, it was, and I'm sure other divers have had worse close calls than that, but every year there's several divers die on the Great Lakes, not just on shipwrecks.
Oh, sweet Moses. I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's several. And there was one here last week, a 77-year-old guy that died in a wreck over in Lake Michigan. I didn't know the guy, but some of the divers I know said, I couldn't believe that he died. So I don't know how he passed away. It might have been a heart attack or something, because he was a very experienced diver.
Is there one shipwreck in particular that you're very proud of?
Edmund Fitzgerald.
There you go. Oh, yeah. But you didn't find that.
No. We went out and located it again.
Right.
My connection with the Fitzgerald started the night it sank. I used to put my young son to bed with shipwreck stories every night. And we let the kids out of school early that day because it was storming so bad. It was actually getting dark like 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
That's right.
And there was waves coming over the lock walls and running down Portage Avenue.
Oh, my goodness.
So I'm telling my son a story with candlelight that night, by the fireplace, actually. And I said, if there's ever going to be a night a ship's going to go down on the lakes, this is the worst storm that I've ever experienced. And sure enough, 7:10 that night, the Fitzgerald went down. I had a transistor radio, and I knew the radio announcer on it had called the Coast Guard. And the young guy at the Coast Guard that was communications director or whatever slipped and said the name of the ship, Edmund Fitzgerald. So that's the first time it ever got out. So I called my friends in Milwaukee that I had been diving with, and that's the home port of the Fitzgerald. And I said, the Fitzgerald went down. They said, what? I said, the Edmund Fitzgerald sunk. You got to be kidding me. So 2 days later, I'm in my classroom teaching, back in school.
Right.
And in walks the superintendent, the principal, you can cut this out after, and a guy named Lieutenant Barry Chambers from the Atlantic Strike Team. We want you to plot every ship that you've found around Whitefish Point and those that you suspect went down.
Right.
And I said, why do you want to do that? He said, we're bringing in a P-3 Orion out of Chicago. What's a flying proton mag?
Right.
They wanted to find the Fitzgerald. And so I played a slight role in that. And then later on, of course, the museum and the raising the bell and getting introduced to all the family members that suffered the loss of their loved ones.
Wow. That is a real connection to history right there.
Well, I think so.
Tom, if somebody's listening to this and they want to learn more about shipwrecks
Yeah.
and all these amazing stories that you've been capturing, the ships that you've been finding, they want to come check out the Historical Society, where's the best place for them to go to find that?
Well, if you want to learn more about the museum itself, I just go on their website, Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum, and there's all kinds of stuff, pictures and stories and recent wreck finds that the Shipwreck Society had found also. I can be contacted by email, tlfarnquist@hotmail.com. I'm willing to talk to anybody about some. This is just the tip of the iceberg because of my experiences on shipwrecks. And
Yeah.
you asked me what my favorite wreck is and so on. I think it's probably the Comet 1875 shipwreck that went down off Whitefish that I found way back in 1980
Oh, wow.
and shot a lot of film on it,
Mm-hmm.
or videotape at that time, graduated from film. And we ended up getting a grant through the Michigan Department of Transportation to do archaeology on 5 deepwater wrecks.
Right.
And the Comet was one of them. And then I got great artists to work with me. Bob McGreevy, he's one of the famous ones on the Great Lakes for painting ships as they sailed and even ships that went down. And then I got a hold of Ken Marshall. Ken Marshall is probably the world's greatest artist without question on capturing ships as they sit on the bottom.
Right.
And you'll see it. I've got a booklet right here that I want to give you that explains all 5 of those wrecks. So I wrote the book and had a friend of mine help lay it out. Got some great pictures, story of the ship when it went down, of the discovery, significance of it, and so on, so forth. So there's a publication there that just talks about 5 alone.
Right.
But there's lots of publications out there on shipwrecks. I mean, I got a library full of dozens and dozens of books that I collected over the years.
Right.
Out of interest just to hear the story, but also maybe some clues on where to look. That kind of thing.
Tom, thank you so much for taking time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, actually.
For our audience, you can always roll on over to totalmichigan.com and click on Tom's interview and get the links that he mentioned above, including the books.
Yes.
And come back next week when we talk to another ordinary Michigander doing some pretty extraordinary things. We'll see you then.